welcome to another lesson of chess and psychology. Today I have a game of Pirc and hopefully a Caro-Kann prepared for you. But before we start, I'd like to take a few seconds and share my condolences to the Chess Society and dear Levon Aranian for the passing of his wife Ariana. I'm very sorry for that. I knew her very little. I only met her a few times in St. Louis, but she was really amazing, very full of life. I'm very sad about it. I can't even imagine how it is for her family and friends. Rest in peace. And just a few seconds of silence, please. Okay, well, let's start our lesson. From last week I talked about how to play against some of the openings because I want you all to have the chance to be as prepared as possible for when you play games. So one of the things that I really like was to prepare against my opponents. I still try to do that. And so last week we showed a game of Caro-Kann with knight d7 against Sharevich, and that game was very nice, and it was an Abu Dhabi tournament. I think it was 2015. Yeah, 2015 was my golden year. So I'm going to show you a game of Pirc, which I played in the same tournament, different opponents, and this opponent was also about 200 rating higher than me. So yeah, I'm gonna show you what I played and my thought process during. Since I can't see your questions, I'm gonna suggest to take a minute to think or so, and feel free to pause whenever. So this is a very common way to start off playing Pirc. And so basically I'm a big fan of playing f4 here, and then the idea is to develop the knight from f3. So next move you want to play knight f3, bishop d3, short castle, and eventually e5 or f5, and it's a very nice setup. I like that I have so much space, and the setup really does make sense to me. However, for this specific game, I wanted to try something different, and so I played this bishop e3. So the idea is that playing bishop e3, I am going to try and form long castle. And so for example, if the opponent was to play knight f6, I would simply play, let's say, queen d2. If, for example, castle, I can play f3, and next move I'm going to try and play long castle followed by g4, and it seems like a very pleasant setup. However, my opponents, instead of castle, played knight g4. So I did remember my preparation because I had looked at this line deeply, so I knew that I was going to make the move that I did in the game. But I would like for you to take a few seconds, pause this video, and think what you want to do as white. Do you want to just ignore the threat, or do you want to move the bishop? So, welcome back. I decided to move the bishop, and bishop g5 is the nice move, mainly because after f6 you get this bishop h4, and f6 is a little honestly weird to do because castle is kind of more logical, but also this knight here is a little easy to attack. So as white, you can simply castle over here, and next move you can go for h3 g4 or f3 g4. So yeah, that seems to be what's wrong with why knight g4 isn't the most precise move. And so my opponent played f6, bishop h4. So now I would suggest to take a few seconds and think about what black can do, because you see black's pawn structure is, well, kind of weird, to be honest. And so it's highly unlikely for black to make short castle, because let's say, for example, short castle now, first of all, I have this check. And after it, let's say you move your king, now I can start attacking your knight. And now I might have g4 or f4. And it's just white's pieces are all in their best positions, whereas black's pieces are all super disorganized. So my opponent decided to play e5 here. So now I had to make a decision. Do I want to exchange these pawns, go to an endgame where my pieces are placed better, but I really like to have my queens on the board because it just gives me more chances to kind of play tricky or to tie my opponent's hands, basically. So yeah, think for yourself, what would you want to do? Do you want to take the pawn and go for that endgame, or you would come up with some intermediate move, for example? So in the game, I did take the pawn, but another thing that I considered was to play h3, because if knight h6, I can just simply play long castle, and e5 is really just black pieces are extremely misplaced. One thing that I didn't like was if black also played this intermediate take, and after take, I was a little uncertain about something like knight c6 or even knight e5. White position is still better, but I wanted to avoid complications, and so I took this pawn. Taking back with knight is not the best option, just simply because there is f4, and then what do you want to do with your knight? You move the knight, there's this bishop c4, long castle. Everything works out for white pretty smoothly. So my opponent, David Gevorgyan, took back with the d pawn, and now I decided to exchange the queens off and do long castle with check. Now black has a few options: bishop d7, knight d7. Knight d7 is the most accurate one, just because if bishop d7, for example, if bishop d7, there is this bishop c4, the possibility of bishop c4 coming up bishop e6, and now you have to move your king again, let's say king c8 or so, and white just has very easy development. Whereas after knight d7, bishop c4 is still valid, but it doesn't really serve the same threads. Now black can simply play c6, and the king is trying to run away from here. Again, white position is still more pleasant and probably still better. Yes, it is still better, but yeah. So what I decided to do was to simply attack the knight and force the knight to either move or the pawn structure to change. So the two logical responses for black are knight h6 and h5. Which one would you do as black? Or as white, which one would you prefer your opponents to play? Well, my opponent played h5, and I really liked it because it gave me the chance to keep attacking this knight. And now I have a quite beautiful move. Who says endgames you can't sacrifice? So it would be very nice if you could find this move on your own. like pause the game, think a minute or so. And so, okay, for those of you who found it, congratulations. F4 is the move that I played, and the idea is very simple. When you take it, I'm going to simply play knight f3. And now my knight has this knight root, whereas before f4, if I played knight f3, I don't really have this knight d4 anymore, and black can simply try and bring this knight to d6, and everything is getting a little bit controlled. But after f4, let's say take knight f3, knight f7 doesn't really work anymore. Can someone, well, can you guys think why doesn't it work anymore? The answer is because of e5. You see, this knight is pinned, so can't move. This pawn is pinned, can't move. And knight can't take it just because I take back. And the only viable option would be to consider something like g5. And now I have so many winnable options. I have e6, I have e takes f6. Let's say e takes f6. Let's say the bishop takes back. I have knight d5 now. If you take over here, I simply take over here. Knight d6. And this is a very pleasant position. It should be a decisive advantage. I can even simply just bring the knight back. The biggest problem with black's position is that black can't really develop the queen side. Let's say you touch this knight, I just take this guy back, or I just take h4, and next move I'm coming to g6, and all these pawns are falling. So that is why knight f7 isn't the most accurate move. But it's really hard to find a good move for black right now. So after knight f3, I think g5 was probably the best move. But the problem with g5 is that there might be these sacrifices. Because now the king is forced to go to e8, and now I get knight d5, going after c7. Let's say you try to defend with bishop e5. I could simply take over here, give you check, and this seems to be too good to be true, honestly. But now I have clear advantage because I have 3 pawns against one of your knights, and the problem is that your pieces, your queenside pieces, are not getting out. So, but I still think g5 would be the way to go. Like if I was black, I would probably just play g5, because my opponent might not take it and might just play like bishop f2, let's say c6, knight d4. See, white is still better, but black is still fighting and trying. Whereas, just compare this position to this position, white has a clear plan, just attacking everything. So, anywho, my opponent decided to play c6. Now, with everything that we've seen so far, with the analysis that we've done, what do you think the right move is? Hint, what was wrong with knight f7? Yep, for those of you who found it, and the ones who just thought about it, great. The right move is to play e5. So the idea is very simple. Basically, with e5, you want to just take over here or play e6. And, well, taking back isn't an option because this is pinned, the knight is pinned. And let's say, for example, if you were to play knight f5, I could simply play e6. And this knight will fall. Because if you take on h4, for example, it doesn't help, the knight is still pinned. If you, let's say, play g5, for example, still no help. I can simply take over here. So, The only move that wouldn't lose the piece is to actually move the king away for black. And so that would be king c7. Now, e6 is not accurate anymore simply because knight e5. You would be letting your opponent to centralize his pieces and to start developing and threatening your pieces. Basically, you would give your opponent too much game, which I always recommend against. So the idea is that one of the biggest things that over the years I learned and I try to apply in every situation in chess and sometimes in real life is to always be ahead of it one move, always be ahead of the ideas, always have better ideas, better spatial advantage, for example, in this position, and to, in order to achieve what you want, in order to win this game, you need to find the most accurate moves, which also sometimes they can be practical. Sometimes you might miss a brilliant tactical idea that the computer finds. That's perfectly fine. But in order to try and avoid those, you should have a good calculation. But at the same time, if you're analyzing a line that's giving your opponent too much room to breathe, too much compensation, you should, if you have another option, you should probably look at that, because when your opponent has too much chances, too much options, too much compensation, it will be really, really hard for you to find the only accurate moves. Just talking from experience. So here I didn't want to play something like e6 to give my opponent the chance to take over the center. So what I did was I just simply took over here on f6. Let's say knight takes f6, and now this was also a pretty cute move, to be honest. The way I thought about it was to try and improve the pieces that are doing absolutely nothing. So this knight on f3 is doing something. This knight on c3 is still doing something. So the two pieces that I considered moving was this bishop of e2 to maybe d3 to put some pressure over here, which probably would have been met by, for example, bishop f5. And the other idea was to put this bishop to g5, because my bishop on h4 is doing absolutely nothing. Just attacking f6 isn't a real threat, and if my bishop were to get to this diagonal, then black king is extremely weak, and this would increase my chances of winning this game. And so I played bishop g5, and there is no realistic way to try and keep this f4 pawn, right? So what my opponents did was he just tried to play bishop f5 and just develop as much as he can, which in that situation probably is the best option. Because another option to think about was, for example, to try and push this pawn and to like create room for the king to breathe probably. But let's say after take, king b6, even bishop e3 check, you go away with the king. I really like this knight to move, or this bishop. Yeah, this is clear advantage. Fun fact, for those of you who like to solve mates, this is mate in 6, so you can take a second and find it. So the way it goes is with rook d6, I have king c7 up here, and bishop f4. This is already pretty much mate. Let's say you play g5, I simply take it. You try to survive with, let's say, anything, check, and mate. Same idea applies if you play king a7, because I give the same knight b5 check and we reach the same position. So yeah, for those of you who like to find nice mates, there is it. Anyways, so my opponent didn't play a5 and he played bishop f5. Simply take it. Now, this is clearly decisive advantage for white. But how can you actually win it? Because that's something that a lot of players have trouble. I certainly had and still struggle with it, because just looking at the position, I know I'm better, but how much better? And also, I know that I'm better, but how to actually convert the advantage to a win is one of the big questions that I have been working to understand better. And so, yeah, if you have any suggestions, ideas, write it in the comments. I'll do my best to read most or all of it later on. So, yeah, think about what would white want to do in this position. So you're white, you know you have advantage. What do? What I did in the game was I played knight e5. My idea was pretty simple. I just wanted to try and get here. And so my opponent stopped this from happening. Now, there is a very, very nice tactical idea. I would recommend you guys to find this, or at least try to find it. So again, this is winning for white, but how to actually get the point. So the things you should think about are checks and takes. The only check that you have is rook d8, which is you should immediately eliminate it. Some of the takes that you have is taking on g6 probably, taking on c6 maybe, taking over here. Well, you can easily eliminate bishop h5 and knight g6 because they don't serve any real purpose. But knight c6, that actually does serve purpose. Why? Because your opponent can't take bishop a6. And next game, please. So this is not the simplest take, but it is easy and you should be able to find it. Just you have to look for it. And if you automatically dismiss checks and takes and like start trying to reorganize your pieces, then you are not going to see this. So I always emphasize on thinking about checks and takes and moves with threats so that you don't miss moves like this. So after taking c6, the game is very close to ending, but my opponent managed to keep playing for another 15 moves. So he tries to, well, my threat is also super simple. If it's my move again, knight e7, and well, it's mate. So the move is very simple. You kind of have to cover this square up. Now, I don't need to move my knight because you still can't take it due to bishop a6 checkmate. So what I could do is to bring this rook out, because this is my last piece that's not doing anything, right? So rook e1, a6, now my opponent wants to take it, because let's say if I do something weird, he can take it, right? There's no more bishop a6. Surprisingly, this is still playable. Not winning anymore, but surprisingly. Anyways, back to real chess. So, yeah, think about where does your knight belong? Where could it serve a good purpose? I thought a lot about knight a5 during the game just because I wanted to go after this pawn, but I also really, really wanted to keep my knight in the center because it felt like it's serving a nice purpose. It's blocking this bishop, it's attacking this pawn. I'm looking at this d7 square, and this knight a4, knight b6 might be coming up. So it felt like a nice idea at the time. It was a good move. My opponents tried to play bishop h6 to exchange some pieces off, and now I got this. I just looking at the game, just looking at the board before making a decision on if you should exchange this, what should you exchange. So one of the things that I really like to try and I'm working on and I'm improving is the exchanges. So for example, over here I do have to take it, but maybe rook f1 is also worth considering. I honestly didn't consider it that deep in the game just because I um, I'm a material up. I wanted to exchange the bishop, and exchanging the bishop would put this g8 knight back into h6, useless h6. But just thinking about it right now, this rook on f4 is much more productive. Rook c4 coming up, maybe rook d4, doubling it up, a lot of ideas. But after taking on h6, knight takes. So what I did was I played bishop d3, mainly because I wanted to go after the pawns. Let's say rook g8. Ooh, this is a nice move. Yeah, take a few seconds and think about this move, and yeah, this is very nice. It's very kind of neat. Yeah. So what I did was I simply played knight c4. I just want to come take your pieces. For example, rook b8. This is super winning, but how? One thing that I could have done was to take over here and then just play rook e6. See, I'm kind of suffocating my opponent. The king is doesn't really have anywhere but c7 to go. All of the pieces are wobbly. Actually, where do you want to place your knight? Can you even move this knight? Because if you move this knight, I just have knight d5, right? Yeah. And this is really losing. So it's losing mainly because, okay, first of all, knight b6 is coming. There's g4 threat to the knight, or even g4 here should be getting the job done. Yeah. So I decided to just play knight d6 and to improve my position like this. So my idea was, well, you're not going to play king b6 because of, well, check. And if you simply go back to c8, rook on the 7th rank. We all have heard about that. Rooks love second ranks or 7th ranks. So I could simply just put more pressure and win this piece. So the problem is you can't really move the knights, right? Because if you, let's say, move the knight, I'm gonna go for the kill. And if you try to defend it, it gets pinned and you lose it. Which is what happened in the game, and we just moved few more, and he's losing his rook and also getting mated in few moves, so he resigned. This was a very nice game, especially because this was a tournament that I was hunting down woman grandmaster norms. I do think I got one. It's been 5 years. But yeah, this was a very nice tournament for me. I was lower rated, but it's all worked out very well. I gained a bunch of rating, and yeah. Anyways, so the lessons that I would like for you to learn in this game is, even if your opponent isn't falling into your preparation, because my opponent didn't. Knight g4 was kind of a weird move. I expected castle, short castle, long castle, and that kind of middle game. And in this game, we didn't really get the chance to be in a middle game, and everything got exchanged off pretty fast. So even if the position, you don't get the position that you were hoping for, you should always be able to find the best moves in that position and just think, what does your position need? So I think that's the biggest lesson. Whoa. I clicked on something wrong. Alright, you're safe. So let's look at another game. So this was a game that I played with dear Anna Sharevich. If I can get out of this game sometime soon, hopefully. Okay. So this is a game that I played with Anna Sharevich in US Championship 2018. I didn't have the best tournaments that year, but I had very nice games and I really liked fighting again. So I usually play this against Caro-Kann. Remember we saw a game last week that I played with against Sharevich, and or if you play bishop f5, one of my favorite lines is this one, because the ideas are quite simple. You are gonna go for the two bishops pretty viciously, and you can't really play h6 because I take it over here. So one of the ways for black to fight this is with e5, either right now or knight d7, then with the idea e5. So for example, knight f4, e5, because if you take, then there's this check and could take back with the queen, and it's not exactly what white would hope for. So white would want this way more than that's e5. So yeah, but in this specific game I prepared to play this f3. My idea was kind of simple. The theory is kind of doesn't really support this idea, and I really haven't played it much since. I only played it in a few blitz games, but the idea is that you just want to get as much space as possible. And for example, the way she played it in the game, she played g6 and I played c3 and bishop f4, which I do think bishop f4 wasn't the best idea, but after take e5, now it gets a little interesting, because after d takes e5, this was actually not black's best approach. I do believe that there are some lot of these ideas with queen coming out of b6 that are very popular, but sorry, my chess space is being a little slow. Let me try and close some of these tabs, which I can't. So sorry for the inconvenience, but I can't close the tabs. Never mind, let's get back to the slow chess space. Yay! Anyways, so where was I? Oh, talking about c3. In the game, I just wanted to develop my pieces, and I honestly wanted to confuse my opponent, which I did, because they weren't expecting me to play f3. And after e5, d takes e5, I think the move that I was kind of worried about was something like queen h4, because I can't really play bishop g3, and I probably should have played something like g3. And for example, let's say queen goes back to e7, it's kind of unpleasant to look at, just the pawn structure, the strong light squared black bishop. Yeah. So anyways, after queen takes d1, today we had 2 endgames, surprisingly, and the class after this is endgames, so you'll be super high with endgames in the next few hours. So maybe I should have called this class How to Play Against Endgames. Wow. I'm just kidding. Anyways, so what I want you to do in this position is to find an idea about where white pieces belong. One small hint: if it was white to move right now, I would definitely play bishop c4, but I can't because of bishop e6. So yeah, take a second and think about where would you want your pieces to be as white and as black, and what are the weaknesses in your position as white and as black. So I think the first thing that you should realize is that you're a pawn up as white. You can't castle, and this is square. Whoops, this is square. Looks super yummy. So that's probably something that you should work on. You should try and put a knight over here. And those were the things that I also noticed and I started working on. So I played knight f3, knight d2, and now my idea is I just want to come here and place my knight to d6. So in the game, let's say you are white, you play knight d2, your opponent plays h6. What do you think your opponent is going for? Well, my thought process, was that I realized that my opponent is going to start pushing these pawns. So if it was black to move, black would most likely play g5, I would play bishop g3, and most likely g4. So one of the first things that I thought about was to play h4. But the problem with h4, in my opinion, was that this could become a serious problem because this g4 square would be super weak and there would be no way for me to actually protect it. And it's a really nice outpost for black's knight. That's why I dissed the idea of h4 and also h3. Well, h3, it's still possible, but I felt like it doesn't really serve much purpose because g4 is still possible. Even if not g4, well, black could simply try and just do something like this, perhaps. So that was my thought process, and so I completely decided to ignore the idea of g5 for right now. I played knight c4, which is a good move, but it's not the best move, because the best move is simply to play bishop c4. If it was me playing today, I would have seen this move right there, because realistically my f1 bishop is worse than this e6 bishop, and realistically my bishop is never gonna be better than that bishop. If my bishop was on c4 and the e8 bishop, the e6 bishop was anywhere else, then yes, this bishop would be stronger because my bishop would have won this war on who gets the right to this diagonal, this a2 g8 diagonal, and that is the only good diagonal on the board. So if it was me playing right now, I would have realized that my bishop on f1 is never going to be better than bishop on e6, and I would have killed to exchange it off. And after exchanging it off, now my knight can jump over here, attack this guy. I could even think about e6 to open my f4 bishop up. I would have a lot of options, basically. And if the opponents didn't take it, let's say knight e7 or something, now I can take it, and this is another weak pawn that I could potentially consider going after. So, one of my biggest mistakes in this specific game was not playing bishop c4, neither now or later, so I'll show you. I played knight c4. I placed my knight into this beautiful d6 square. I developed my king in hopes of bringing my rook closer. Well, the other thing was I wanted to take on b7, but rook b8 and then b2 would fall. So that's another little thing to play king c2. Rook b8 protecting the pawn. Now, what do you think white should do? Little hint, I mentioned this move before. So I should have played bishop c4 again. Even though it would exchange it off and this knight would come backwards, that's still okay, because first of all, I would have so much defenders for this weak pawn that g4 wouldn't matter. And if you were to push my knight away, I would just jump back to d6, and now e6 is a serious threat. And all the same things that we mentioned before. So bishop c4 is what I should have played. Instead, I played knight d4. See, knight d4 looks like such a logical, nice move, right? You're going knight d4, you're attacking this bishop, and you want to mess with your opponent's pawn structures, you want to take two bishops. It seems so nice on the book, right? Well, not so much on the board. So the problem with knight d4 is that I simply got too many attackers on my pawn, and I lost this pawn. So let's say if I took over here and I played bishop c4, there's always just king e7 and protecting this pawn, and there's no direct way for me to continue attacking e6. I mean, I could try to trick you into maybe rook f7, but let's say rook f1, you simply play rook f8, and that's the end of that story. So what I did in the game was I decided to just give up this pawn because there was no realistic way for me to actually keep it. And now, from what I remember, I did not have any more advantage on the game, and even though I have two bishops and they are weak pawns and I have a strong knight on d6, I don't have an advantage. So what I would want you to think about is what would you proceed? What would be the move that you would do as white? And when you're done thinking about that, here's some ideas. For example, if king e7, I have this rook f7. You take it, rook d1. Nice, huh? This would have been so pleasant if it happened. Going after e6. Yeah, right? So, just something to think about. I did have this idea to try and trick my opponents into playing king e7, but it's too obvious, and she of course saw the idea of knight f4 to block everything. So, well, here as for whites, there isn't a super strong move. It's just about realizing that you don't really have an advantage anymore, and to try and find new ways to make moves with that knowledge. So what I did was I just brought my knight back and I tried to block this side a little more and to try and ideally eat some pawns. Now, what do you think black should do? Because black can actually simply just take over here. But what do you think she should have done? So what she did was she played b5. Again, this is a very, honestly, not much heat to it, this position. But you should always try and create something. And for me, I tried to create that something with, for example, rook f1. My idea was quite simple. If you are going to take this guy, I'll give this check. If king e8, I have bishop h5. If king d8, I have rook d1. And this would have been more pleasant than my opponent not taking, honestly, because see, it's a free piece, and it would have given me too many chances to create compensation and to create advantage possibilities. So yeah, this is something that you should always try to do for yourself, to create possibilities, to create compensation, and to not let your opponents do it. So my opponent didn't let me do it. She simply played rook f8, and in this point, I did realize that there's no way I can get much out of this position, and I simply pretty much called it a day because we exchanged everything off, and after reaching 30, we both agreed to a draw because this is I mean, you couldn't have a more drawish endgame, even if you tried. Well, exaggeration, but you understand the point. Different colored bishop, same amount of pawns, boring. So yeah, that's another game that I wanted to show you. So I do want to talk about the opening a little bit more, because one of the big ideas in this game, after we entered the end game, was this bishop c4, which I continuously missed, and it cost me the point. Well, half a point. So what I would want you to try is to have that understanding that, okay, so this bishop doesn't really do anything, doesn't realistically seem to be doing anything ever, so let's exchange it off with the good bishop. Another way to think about it is this bishop is super active, probably the most active piece in black's position, so it is a good idea to exchange it off. It's always a good idea to try and exchange off your opponent's most active pieces. About the opening. So f3 is very interesting, and I honestly don't remember why we chose to play this against Anna, but I do remember that I did prepare it with my then coach, and I do remember working a lot on g6 ideas and playing online a lot on this, because, well, honestly, if you were to play something like knight f6 right now, I think one of the biggest problems is e5, and what do you want to do with the knight? Go to d7, well, I have bishop d3, and then maybe e6, or even e6, whoops. So there's a lot of ideas to work on. Another thing that I remember I kind of was worried about was this idea of e5, because if you take it, there's this nasty check, or even taking here first and then e5, because if you take it, there's this check, and these are a lot of things to be cautious about. So yeah, what I usually like to play now and before this game too, well, anytime except this game, was to play knight d2, and my idea is quite simple. If bishop f5, I just want to come after this bishop, as mentioned slightly earlier in the game, in the opening. So now black has a bunch of ideas. One of them is this knight f6, and like bishop here, you push, there's take, or instead of knight f6, e6, just bringing the bishop out earlier to going after this knight. So h5 it's not as interesting anymore, and you can't really move the knight because of the weakness of this knight. So yeah, these are some ideas that I'm gonna try and show in the next week, that we're looking at more Caro-Kann and Pirc, and hopefully I'll be able to show you more games, not only end games, but yeah, on how to try and play against Pirc Caro-Kann. We've already seen some French, but I always have more French, so well, don't worry about that. So yeah, hopefully we'll get to wrap those up in April. French, Caro-Kann, Pirc, and Modern. Modern is c6 first and g6, d6 later. That's kind of weird. Philidor. those are some stuff that with white you should all be comfortable knowing how to play, and it's not that hard to find a pleasant setup. And then hopefully after that we'll move to black openings and Sicilian and e4, e5, and there's so many openings to cover, so don't worry, we'll have a lot to go over. Well, thank you for tuning in today. I wish I could see live chat and talk to each and one of you, but I'll do my best to look at the comments, so please do leave comments. And I'll be live on Thursday, teaching something on Friday and Saturday, so tune in for those and stay safe.